So let's have a chat about leisure and recreation. I bet you can't wait. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to define something. We've got here the notion of leisure time. Okay, leisure time. And look, I guess you know what this word means. I guess you've heard this word before. Let's see if we can be like super clear in what we mean by them so we can write about them accurately. When we talk about leisure time, it is time that is free from work. It's time that is free from work and chores. Okay, so let's just be clear. We would define all of the things in this image as leisure time or based around leisure time. Okay, most of them are sort of physical recreation activity, but they are they are not chores, they are not work. Okay, so leisure time is that amount of time you've got free and available from the things that you have to do. I guess work could easily become school, right, if you look at it in that sense. So we've got that notion, we've got leisure time. Okay, what then is, and I'm going to put it in the physical bit in brackets here, what is physical recreation? Let's have a think about it. So recreation is a voluntary, so it's something you choose to do. It is a voluntary, and I'm going to put in brackets here, physical. It's a voluntary physical activity done when? When do you think it's done? Done in, guess what's coming next? Done in, that's right, leisure time. All right, so now our leisure time has meaning. So when we are free from work, chores, and by the way, this wouldn't include things like having a kip, like sleeping at night. That effectively, you bracket that as chore, something you have to do. But physical recreation is something that you choose to do when you have that leisure time. So can you now see how we'd be pretty happy to describe this as physical recreation? We'd be pretty happy, unless it's a compulsion, we'd be pretty happy to describe these things in that way. Agreed? Okay, let's take it a bit further. What then is play? And is this here, these children, I guess we think about children when we talk about play, is this an example of play? And it is an activity, and it doesn't have to be like a sporty, gamey thing, but it's activity done for enjoyment. That goes without saying, otherwise why would you play? An activity done for enjoyment and is non-serious. Okay, and is non-serious. Okay, and we could even go further and say it's not got set rules, there's not set boundaries, there's not a set time limit. So would we describe what we're seeing here as play? Well, it certainly seems enjoyment based. It kind of has a touch of, is it serious? I'm going to say it's not. We're going to say it's play, but it's kind of moving towards something else, right? We've got the idea here of like, these are the goalposts. We've got this is kind of the barrier. Maybe there's another barrier over here. Maybe they're saying we're playing for 4 minutes. Maybe it's first to 3. These are rules, and it moves it away from play, okay, once it's kind of rule-based. And that's where we come to our fourth notion, and that is the notion of sport. Now, I haven't really got a picture of kind of competitive sport up here, but the key differentiator to make with sport is it's competitive. It's competitive, rule-based. Okay? It's rule-based. And it is a game or activity. Game or activity. Now, let's take our swimmer for a second. I've made an assumption until just now that this fella here is just having a swim in the local pool. But what if he is in lanes? What if he's in a lane and there's someone else over here swimming as well and they're racing? All of a sudden, that's no longer physical recreation. That's sport. It's competitive. Okay? This clearly is not sport. This is something merging between sport, play, and physical recreation. But sport is a competitive, rule-based environment, okay? And it's set times, set limits, set rules. It's codified. That's what we mean by these things. Now, the point I want to sort of finish off with you today is to ask a question. I want to ask this question, and I want to consider which factors influence recreational activities. And specifically, I'm talking about the choice of people to take part in physical activity. Remember that we know that adults should be doing 5 times 30 minutes a week of physical activity, physical recreation, and that children should be doing 7 times 30 minutes. But we also know that some people do and some people don't. So why is it that some do and some don't? What are the reasons? So here's the first one. Age. It may be that a very elderly person has fewer limited opportunities, maybe a very young person. Likewise, it's sort of a elder childhood and also in young adulthood, age does not seem to be so much of a restriction. But what if age means that your work commitments change, for example? What about this one? Something else that differs from person to person is interests. There are people who all they want to do is read. Okay? As a teenager, I was one of them. But people like to do that. That's their interest. Other people want to move and run, and they want to play sport, and they want to compete, and they want to play. So these things can differ, and of course, most people have most people have more complex interests than just one, of course. But I'm just being, as it were, polar. Here we're talking about social circumstances. What about if somebody would really like to be active but is working 50 hours a week in their job, is raising children and is a single parent, for example? That social circumstance is going to restrict that, and other people have more free time available, are going to have more opportunity. What about family influences? What about things like support? What about for teenage, for example, having a parent who will drive you to fixtures, to coaching, to those sort of things, invest money in those things too? That's going to make quite a big difference. What about this one? We're talking about the idea of facilities and facilities being available to someone. Guys, I've always lived in an urban environment. Does that explain why I'm not very good at alpine skiing? Maybe it does. But in an urban environment, I have developed sort of skill levels in games and football and swimming and running and these sorts of things. So maybe facilities is part of that. Think about, some interesting examples there. Think about access to something like 50-meter pools for competitive swimming. Think about access to, ski slope. These influence whether people participate in things or not. And this last one is very much linked to that exact same point. What about where you live? Okay, and I've just made the point about, I don't live anywhere near any sort of snowy mountain ranges. So what are my opportunities? Yes, holidays, yes, time away in the Alps or the Pyrenees or whatever, but where you live has an influence. Think about the distinctions between urban and rural living. How many of you have got the opportunity for equestrian sports? That's going to go up. If you're in a rural space, it's going to go down if you're in an urban space. Not that it's impossible, it's just that it's harder, right? It's not as accessible. Those are some interesting points. Thanks.